Some things in this world do not end with a sudden dramatic crash. They simply fade away so slowly, so quietly, that we don't even realize they are gone until we look back decades later and realize the entire landscape of our lives has changed. Think about the street you live on right now. You likely pull your car into an automatic garage, the heavy door rolling down behind you like a fortress gate. You walk into an air-conditioned house, lock the deadbolt, and spend the evening bathed in the blue light of a glowing screen. It is quiet. It is private. It is entirely disconnected. But if you rewind the clock just 50 or 60 years, that exact same street possessed a completely different heartbeat. The mid-century American neighborhood was a living, breathing organism, bound together by a deeply ingrained set of social traditions. These were the unwritten rules of how our grandparents lived, how they celebrated their triumphs, how they mourned their dead, how they welcomed the stranger, and how they physically marked the changing of the seasons. Between 1965 and 1985, as we gained the modern miracles of central air conditioning, mass television, and digital schedules, these beautiful analog traditions were quietly sacrificed on the altar of convenience. Today, we are opening the vault of vanished Americana to remember 15 forgotten traditions that shaped the greatest generation. Most of these are gone forever, but a few of them hold the exact medicine our modern, isolated society desperately needs. Welcome back to Vanished Americana, the channel where we step out of the frantic, overwhelming rush of the modern digital age to sit quietly with the wisdom, the warmth, and the unmatched grace of the generations who came before us. There is a profound sense of loss when we realize that the social fabric our grandparents wove is unraveling. They lived in a world that was undeniably harder in terms of physical labor and economic struggle, yet it was infinitely richer in terms of human connection. The traditions they upheld were not rigid, empty formalities. They were the invisible glue of the community. They were the scheduled moments that forced people to look one another in the eye, to share their burdens, and to acknowledge that we are all walking through this life together. In this episode, we are going to dissect 15 of these beautiful lost rituals. We will explore the lost art of the unannounced visit, the sacred nature of the Sunday dinner table, and the profound, intimate dignity of mourning in the family parlor. Pour yourself a hot cup of coffee, settle into a comfortable chair, and let's journey back to a time when your neighbors were your safety net, and a front porch was the most important room in the house. To understand the social architecture of the mid-century American lifestyle, you have to look at the physical architecture of the homes themselves and how people moved through their towns. The world before the 1970s was an incredibly public, outward-facing society. The concept of absolute, impenetrable privacy did not exist the way it does today. And because people spent far more time outside their four walls, the community developed a rich tapestry of localized traditions meant to weave strangers into friends. 1. The unannounced front porch visit, the casual drop-in. In the modern era, showing up at someone's house without texting them first is considered a massive social transgression, bordering on a hostile intrusion. If the doorbell rings unexpectedly, we assume it is a package delivery or a salesperson, and we often check a digital camera before deciding whether to open the door. But to our grandparents, the unannounced front porch visit was the absolute cornerstone of social life. The architecture of the era supported it. Homes were built with deep, wide, covered front porches positioned close to the sidewalk, rather than hidden behind 6-foot privacy fences. On a warm summer evening, before the hum of central air conditioning drove everyone indoors, families would naturally gravitate to the porch. They would sit in heavy wooden rocking chairs or metal gliders, listening to the baseball game on a transistor radio. Neighbors would simply walk down the street and stroll up the front steps without an invitation. There was no expectation for the host to provide a lavish meal or a perfectly clean living room. You simply pulled up an extra chair, poured a glass of iced tea or lemonade from a sweating glass pitcher, and talked as the sun went down. It was a fluid, organic form of socialization that required absolutely no scheduling, no calendar invites, and no stress. 2. The welcome wagon and the new neighbor casserole. When a moving truck pulls into a neighborhood today, the new residents are often left entirely to their own devices, perhaps receiving a polite wave from across the street. In the mid-century era, a new family arriving on the block triggered an immediate organized community response. Within the first 48 hours, the women of the neighborhood would mobilize. This was the era of the welcome wagon, sometimes an official community organization, but more often an informal, unstoppable force of local grandmothers and mothers. They would arrive at the front door bearing a freshly baked pound cake, a warm casserole dish wrapped in a checkered towel, or a basket of garden vegetables. This tradition served a brilliant dual purpose. It provided a hot meal for a family whose kitchen was still packed in cardboard boxes, and it served as an immediate physical introduction. The newcomers were instantly briefed on the unwritten rules of the street, who to call if the plumbing broke, which kids were available to babysit, and what time the mail carrier usually arrived. You were not allowed to remain a stranger for long. The community aggressively and warmly absorbed you into the fold. 3. The Sunday afternoon drive, the ride to nowhere. In an era when gasoline was cheap, automobiles were massive, comfortable rolling living rooms, and Sunday was fiercely protected as a day of absolute rest, the Sunday afternoon drive was a national institution. This was not a commute. This was a purposeful journey with absolutely no destination. After the heavy midday Sunday dinner, the entire family would pile into the sprawling bench seats of a Buick or a Chevrolet. The father would roll the windows down to let the breeze in, and they would simply drive. They drove out to the newly built suburban developments to look at the wood framing of houses under construction. They drove out past the city limits to the rural county roads to look at the autumn foliage or the spring blossoms. They drove through the wealthy neighborhoods to admire the manicured lawns. The AM radio would be playing softly in the background, and the children in the back seat would fall asleep to the hypnotic hum of the massive V8 engine and the smell of hot asphalt and vinyl upholstery. It was a shared, enclosed experience of pure, unadulterated leisure, a designated block of time where the only goal was to exist in the same space and watch the world roll by through the windshield. 4. The town bandstand concert in the park. Before entertainment was beamed directly into our living rooms on demand, entertainment was a highly localized communal event. Almost every small to mid-sized American town featured a central square or public park, and sitting proudly in the center of that green space was a wooden gazebo or a bandstand. During the humid months of July and August, the tradition of the Friday or Saturday evening band concert brought the entire town together. The local municipal band, made up of the town dentist on the trumpet, the high school music teacher on the trombone, and the local mechanic on the snare drum, would gather to play Sousa marches, big band standards, and patriotic hymns. Families would arrive early, laying down heavy wool tartan blankets on the damp grass or unfolding aluminum lawn chairs. Children would run in packs, chasing fireflies with glass mason jars, while teenagers flirted by the concession stand. It cost absolutely nothing, and it forced the community to occupy the exact same physical space, breathing the same air and listening to the same music, regardless of their economic background or social standing. 5. The unscheduled neighborhood block party. Today, if a street wants to host a block party, it requires municipal permits, rented barricades, and weeks of digital coordination on neighborhood apps. Our grandparents practiced the art of the spontaneous, unscheduled block party. These events were entirely organic, usually triggered by a particularly beautiful summer evening or a holiday weekend. Someone would pull a charcoal grill out to the end of their driveway and start roasting hot dogs. A neighbor would smell the smoke, walk over with a bowl of homemade potato salad, and drag their lawn chair into the cul-de-sac. Within an hour, another neighbor would bring out a cooler of cheap beer and glass bottles of Coca-Cola. A record player or a heavy stereo speaker would be pointed out a living room window to provide the soundtrack. The street would temporarily belong to the people, not the cars. It was a chaotic, beautiful, completely decentralized gathering where adults stayed up late, laughing in the warm night air while the children played kick the can under the flickering amber glow of the streetlights until they were completely exhausted. While the community traditions tied the neighborhood together, the traditions practiced inside the home were the anchors of the family unit itself. The mid-century household operated on a distinct, unbreakable rhythm. These rituals marked the passage of time, the changing of the seasons, and the profound transitions of human life. They were treated with a level of respect and solemnity that has been almost entirely lost in our modern, hyper-scheduled culture. 6. The sacred Sunday dinner, the unbreakable table. The modern family dinner is often a fragmented, rushed affair. Teenagers eat in their rooms, parents eat standing at the kitchen island, and the television provides a constant, chaotic background noise. But for the generations of the past, the Sunday dinner was a sacred, unbreakable institution. It was not just a meal, it was the temporal anchor of the entire week. It typically occurred in the early afternoon, shortly after church services concluded. The good china, often a wedding gift that was fiercely protected, was pulled from the hutch. A heavy ironed linen tablecloth was laid out. The meal was almost always a significant slow-cooked protein. A heavy pot roast surrounded carrots and potatoes, a massive roasted chicken, or a baked ham with cloves. The gravy was made from scratch in a cast-iron skillet, and the bread was pulled hot from the oven. Attendance was absolutely mandatory. You did not schedule sports practices, meetings, or social calls during this time. The family sat down together, bowed their heads in gratitude, and spent 2 hours engaged in actual conversation. It was the designated time to air grievances, share triumphs, and reaffirm the bonds of the family unit over a table of heavily seasoned, deeply comforting food. 7. The seasonal deep clean, the spring and fall rituals. We currently clean our homes in panicked, superficial rushes, relying on disposable wipes and chemical sprays. Our grandmothers observed the tradition of the seasonal deep clean, a brutal, highly choreographed physical undertaking that fundamentally reset the energy of the home. When the frost finally broke in April, the spring cleaning commenced. It was a war against the trapped, stale air of winter. Every single window in the house was thrown open. Heavy winter woolen curtains were taken down, washed, and replaced with light, breezy summer sheers. The massive, heavy area rugs were rolled up, dragged out to the backyard, thrown over a sturdy clothesline, and literally beaten with a wire rug beater to dislodge 6 months of trapped dust. The walls and baseboards were scrubbed down with hot water and trisodium phosphate, TSP, to remove the oily soot left behind by the coal furnace or the fireplace. The mattresses were dragged out to the porch to bake and sterilize in the direct sunlight. The entire family was conscripted into this labor. When the weekend was over, the house smelled of lemon wax, fresh wind, and absolute, pristine renewal. 8. The evening listening hour, radio around the hearth. Before the television became the glowing, hypnotic focal point of every American living room, the family gathered around the radio. But the tradition of the evening listening hour was a vastly different psychological experience than watching a modern screen. The heavy wooden console radio, often a beautiful piece of Zenith or Philco furniture, stood in the corner of the room. After the dinner dishes were washed and put away, the family would gather in the dimly lit room. They didn't stare at the radio, they stared at the fire, or they closed their eyes, or the mother would mend socks while listening. They tuned in to serialized dramas, chilling mystery broadcasts like The Shadow, or the booming, joyful noise of a big band broadcast from a ballroom halfway across the country. Because the radio only provided audio, it required the active, collective imagination of the entire family. They were all visualizing the exact same story in their own minds, sharing a profound, quiet intimacy in the dark that the flashing, overstimulating barrage of modern television completely destroyed. 9. The harvest swap and the sharing of the excess. Before the global supply chain provided every fruit and vegetable year-round, American families relied heavily on their own backyard gardens. But the tradition of the harvest swap was born out of the absolute refusal to let anything go to waste. When August arrived, gardens across the neighborhood would suddenly explode with an unmanageable abundance of produce. A single family cannot eat 50 pounds of zucchini or 3 dozen massive heirloom tomatoes before they spoil. The tradition was to share the excess through a silent, beautiful neighborhood economy. Baskets of dark green cucumbers, sweet corn, and heavy tomatoes were simply left on the front porches of neighbors who didn't have the space to garden. Paper bags full of green beans were brought to the church on Sunday and handed out in the parking lot. There was a running joke in many Midwestern towns that you had to lock your car doors in August, not to prevent theft, but to prevent a neighbor from sneaking a massive baseball bat-sized zucchini onto your front seat. It was a beautiful tradition that turned the dirt of the backyard into a currency of absolute generosity. 10. The parlor wake, mourning at home. This is perhaps the most profound tradition that we have outsourced and forgotten. Today, when a loved one passes away, the body is immediately whisked away by professionals to a clinical, sterile funeral home, and the mourning process is highly structured and hidden from the home. But historically, the room at the front of a house was called the parlor, and its primary sacred function was to host the dead. When a grandparent or family member passed, they were bathed, dressed, and laid out in a simple wooden casket right in the front parlor of the family home. The mirrors in the house were covered with dark cloth, and the clocks were stopped at the exact time of death. For 2 or 3 days, the community would come to the house. The neighbors would fill the kitchen with heavy casseroles and pies, and they would sit vigil with the grieving family through the long, dark hours of the night. You slept in the house with your dead. You sat next to the casket and told stories. It forced the family and the community to confront the absolute physical reality of death in a space that was safe, familiar, and deeply intimate. It was only when this tradition faded in the 1930s and 40s that magazines began rebranding the death room, or the parlor, into what we now cheerfully call the living room. The final block of vanished traditions deals with the lost social graces, the unwritten rules of etiquette, respect, and communication that dictated how people interacted in an analog world. These traditions required effort, time, and a level of intentionality that our fast-paced, instant gratification society has completely abandoned. They were the friction that made human relationships meaningful. 11. The handwritten thank you note, the stationary desk. Today, if we receive a gift or a favor, we shoot off a quick 3-second text message containing an emoji, and the social contract is considered fulfilled. Our grandparents viewed gratitude as a formal, physical obligation. The tradition of the handwritten thank you note was an absolute pillar of mid-century etiquette. In a quiet corner of the bedroom or the hallway, there was usually a small writing desk stocked with heavy, high-quality cardstock, a fountain pen, and a book of stamps. If a grandmother received a sweater for her birthday, or if a neighbor brought over a meal when she was sick, she would sit down at that desk within 48 hours. She would take the time to think about the words, write them out in flowing, beautiful, practiced cursive, address the envelope, pay for the postage, and physically walk it to the mailbox. The recipient would then experience the tactile joy of opening a real letter. It wasn't just about saying thank you, it was a physical manifestation of time and effort. It communicated, "You are important enough to me that I stopped my life, sat down in silence, and poured my gratitude onto paper just for you." 12. The party line. Telephone etiquette. Before the era of private encrypted cell phones resting in every pocket, telecommunications was a highly communal shared resource. In rural and suburban areas, families relied on the party line. A single telephone line was physically shared by 3, 4, or even 5 different households on the same street. Each house had a distinct ring pattern. 2 short rings meant the call was for the Smiths. 1 long ring meant it was for the Joneses. But anyone could pick up the heavy Bakelite receiver at any time and hear the conversation happening on the line. This bizarre technological reality created a highly specific, forgotten tradition of telephone etiquette. Eavesdropping was a notorious temptation, but the unwritten code of honor dictated that if you picked up the phone and heard your neighbors talking, you quietly and gently placed the receiver back on the cradle. If you desperately needed to make a call, you would interrupt politely. "Excuse me, Martha, this is John. I need to call the doctor. Could I use the line?" It forced a level of forced cooperation and patience, reminding everyone that communication was a shared community privilege, not an isolated private right. 13. Dressing up for travel, the dignity of transit. Walk through any major international airport today, and you will see a sea of people wearing pajamas, sweatpants, and highly casual athletic wear, treating the incredible miracle of human flight like a lazy Sunday morning on the couch. This would have deeply horrified the generations of the past. The tradition of the mid-century era was that traveling, whether boarding a silver Boeing 707, a cross-country Greyhound bus, or a Pullman sleeper train, was a significant glamorous event that required the utmost respect. Men wore crisply tailored two-piece suits, polished leather Oxfords, and fedoras. Women wore elegant day dresses, heels, and often carried a matching hat and gloves. Children were dressed in their absolute Sunday best. You dressed up for travel not because the seats were more comfortable, but because you were entering a public space and sharing an enclosed environment with strangers. Dressing impeccably was a sign of respect for the journey, for the crew operating the machine, and for the people sitting next to you. It elevated the act of travel from a miserable, chaotic chore into a highly dignified, celebrated human experience. 14. The calling card and the formal introduction. While this tradition began to fade in the very early part of the mid-century, its remnants shaped the social graces of our grandparents. Before you could simply follow someone on social media to establish a connection, entering a new social circle required a formal, physical introduction. If you moved to a new town or wished to make the acquaintance of a prominent family, you did not simply knock on their door. You utilized a calling card. These were small, beautifully engraved pieces of heavy paper bearing nothing but your name. You would leave the card on a silver tray in the vestibule of the home. If the family wished to associate with you, they would return the favor by leaving their card at your home days later. It was a highly structured, incredibly polite dance of boundaries and consent. It ensured that relationships were built slowly, intentionally, and with mutual respect, rather than the chaotic, immediate, and often invasive access we demand from one another today. 15. The art of the long goodbye, the doorway lingering. We end with the most relatable, warm, and stubbornly persistent tradition of the American past, the art of the long goodbye. Today, when a modern social gathering ends, people simply announce they are leaving, grab their coats, text their Uber, and vanish into the night within 60 seconds. But to our grandparents, leaving a home was a gradual, multi-staged process that required a massive amount of time. The goodbye was an absolute ritual. It began in the living room, where the initial declaration of departure was made. Then, everyone stood up and slowly drifted into the front hallway, where another 15 minutes of intense conversation occurred while coats were retrieved. The group then migrated to the front porch, where stories that had been forgotten during dinner were suddenly remembered and told in the cool night air. Finally, the host would walk the guests all the way down the driveway to the car. The guests would roll down the heavy glass windows of the automobile, and the host would lean on the doorframe, chatting for another 10 minutes while the engine idled. The long goodbye was a physical, beautiful manifestation of love. It was the absolute reluctance to let the connection end. It was a way of saying, I have enjoyed your presence so much that I am going to drag out this departure for as long as humanly possible. When we pull back the curtain on these 15 vanished traditions, we are forced to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality about the modern world. We have traded the front porch for the glowing screen. We have traded the sacred Sunday dinner for the drive-through window. We have traded the deep analog friction of human connection for the cold, sterile convenience of instant digital gratification. Our grandparents were not perfect, but they understood something fundamental that we have forgotten. True wealth is found in the people around you, and a community only survives if you actively, intentionally weave it together every single day. These traditions may have faded, but they are not entirely dead. They are simply waiting for someone brave enough to turn off the television, unlock the front door, and bring a warm casserole to the new family across the street. If this journey back into the warm, analog heart of the American past brought a tear to your eye, hit that subscribe button and pull up a chair here at Vanished Americana. We will continue to remember the history, the lost arts, and the quiet dignity of the generations who built our world. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these 15 traditions do you miss the most, And which one are you going to try and bring back to your own family? Thank you for watching. Take the time for a long goodbye this week, and I will see you in the next chapter.